This video is sponsored by Squarespace. CCD digicams are all the rage at the moment, mainly because of the retro early 2000s looking photos they're able to capture. But all of this online hype has meant that the price of your dad's old point and shoot has now skyrocketed, meaning that they're hard to get hold of and fairly expensive for what they are. Well, that is until now, because I found this. Now this claims to be a CCD digital camera that can capture massive 48 megapixel images and 4K video, all for just over £17 or around $22 from TikTok Shop. And I bought one. Let's try it out. First of all, the box is very nice, and I'm slightly regretting the fact I didn't buy this sort of teal green colour. You'll see the colour I bought. Now obviously I've gone for luminous yellow because why not? And also I've noticed the first discrepancy. On the listing it says 48 megapixels. On here it quite clearly states 64 megapixels, so we'll find out if that's true later on. Also, why do they feel the need to print all this crap on the front of the camera? This would look way nicer without this. So Chinese manufacturers, stop doing that. Stop it. So before we look at this, let's have a look what else you get in the box, because I can hear rattling, which means freebies. So we've got a micro SD USB card reader type thing with, quite considerately, a converter to take it from USB to USB-C, future-proofed, obligatory wrist strap that nobody's ever going to use, instruction manual, all written in pidgin English for your enjoyment, but most importantly of all, free stickers! Okay, let's be serious for a minute. Let's talk about the camera, because initially, although yes, very plasticky, it actually feels quite nice in the hand, and it's a decent size. You could definitely slip this into your pocket. And I've just noticed there's no compartment for a battery, so and there's no extra batteries in the box. I'm assuming once the battery dies, the camera goes along with it, unfortunately. On the side, there is a USB-C port, which is obviously going to be used for charging, and then there's also an SD card slot. Let's have a look which size card they've given us. They have generously given us a 32 gigabyte micro SD card. Now, in terms of controls, you might think, hey, look, there's a zoom rocker on the top. No, just fake plastic. I don't know why they do this. On the top, you've got your shutter button with the obligatory camera symbol, of course. And then on the back, you've got a power on switch and then a little 4-way D-pad and an OK button. I thought this was an EVF. It is not an EVF. It looks like a reverse camera for taking selfies, which is a little bit odd. On the front it says this is a Super EBC FX 35mm f2 WR, weather resistant. I feel like that's a Fujifilm ripoff. I very much doubt that this is weather resistant in any way, shape or form. And then digital camera lens. Thanks for pointing that one out. It looks like it has a flash, but I suspect, knowing these types of cameras, this will just be a bright LED that gives you cataracts. Good. There's now no means of getting that protective film on, so we're gonna have to live with that. Okay, let's fire her up. Welcome! Ooh, music. We've got a bunch of symbols that look like sort of early 2000s iPhone app logos, and no description, though the first thing that stands out to me is a controller. Why is there a controller on a camera? It has Pac-Man on it. This is just an emulation of This even got Namco. This is a literal emulator on this camera. One or two play. How are you going to play two players? It doesn't work. Oh, there we go. I don't think this slow-mo effect is intentional. I think this is genuinely the limitations of the computing power on this camera. So this camera has less processing power than that of a 1980s arcade machine. This doesn't bode well, does it? There's also Tetris, whatever that is, and End of the World mode, but we'll worry about those another day. So obviously this one's going to be camera. We've already established this is gaming mode. And let's find out what this is, because this is video capture mode. I thought it was video playback. It's not. It's video capture mode. DJ mode. DJ! So I'm assuming you can just put your MP3s on there and listen to music. No headphone slot though, so you're definitely just going to piss off everyone in the surrounding area. Anyway, heart. What is this one? Selfie mode, do we reckon? Oh no, fancy frames. So basically this mode is your filter effects mode, and you've got a whole different variety to choose from. You've got borders, you've got weird Hulk green mode, honeycomb effect, multiple square image effect, 4, 2, let me guess, 1. Oh, that's cool. This is the best camera I've ever shot with. But also the ability to overlay glasses, goat horn mode, natural British looking teeth mode, mustache, and then more borders. Okay, for now, back to the main menu. So what's this one then? We've got a little paintbrush. Okay, setting the background on the camera, a very important feature. So this one is reviewing your pictures, look at that. And then obviously this is gonna be settings, and it's all in Chinese. Let me set it to English. Finally. Okay, let's have a look. So back to the top. So you've got image quality. So this is the megapixel count. So it was by default set to 3 megapixels, which, come on, you can do better than that. So let's find out whether or not it can do 48 or 64 megapixels. Place your bets in the comment section now. Let's find out, ladies and gentlemen. It is 48 megapixels is the maximum amount. So the lying scumbags couldn't even get the number on the front right, could they? Shocking. So for video mode, you've got 1080p, 720p, or VGA. So lying scumbag number 2 doesn't even do 4K video. Now I've set it back to English, we can see what these games are. So we've got Bomber, which is actual Bomberman. Block, which will be Block Breaker, I imagine. Pac-Man, and then Tetris. Yeah, so you got those 4 games on it. But anyway, we're not here to play knockoff games. We're here to test out the camera. So how does it perform in real life? But before we can do that, we need to first talk about today's sponsor, and that's Squarespace. Now, whether you're a total newbie or a seasoned veteran, every photographer needs a high-quality website to showcase their work. And I've personally been using Squarespace to build and host a number of websites over the years. And that's largely because I have next to no experience building websites, but with the huge range of templates to choose from and its simple drag and drop interface, it's never been easier to create a professional looking website in just a matter of minutes. So if you want to get started, simply head over to squarespace.com/Tom Calton to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using the code Tom Calton. And thank you once again to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode and supporting the channel. Well, let's start by taking a look at the feature I was least expecting to find on this camera. I mean, aside from the list of bootleg Nintendo games, and that's of course the music player. Now, when you insert this micro SD card into your computer, you will find a folder called MP3. All you need to do is place any tunes you think absolutely slap into this folder, making sure, of course, that they are in an MP3 format. And then once you put the card back into the camera, they'll be ready to play. So how's the audio quality? Well, it's actually not that bad. I mean, it is really quiet, but I've definitely heard worse audio quality before. But why did I choose this song specifically? Well, it only seemed fitting as it turns out that this camera is nothing but a bag of lies. Why the fuck you lying? Now, starting with the video capture mode, it's all very basic in nature with no manual controls whatsoever. And even with the limited amount of physical buttons on this thing, they don't match up to what their symbols suggest they should do. Pressing up or down on the D-pad will cycle through an unnecessarily long list of filters and cartoonish overlays, none of which are actually of any real creative value. But to be fair, at least the up and down labels somewhat make sense, as the other ones just don't. The right button on the D-pad has this weird rectangle icon thing on it, which I can only assume is a poor attempt at replicating a playback symbol. But it doesn't play back your footage at all. In fact, it alters between the front and rear cameras. Pressing this OK button in the center actually activates the flash on the front, which turns out, as I rightly predicted, is not actually a flash, but rather a super bright LED light that kicks out more blinding rays than a bald guy in sunlight. And finally, pressing the sun icon on the left of the D-pad does absolutely nothing at all. Why they didn't program this button to activate the flash is kind of beyond me, because surely the sun icon would be way more fitting than OK. Anyway, how does the 1080p video footage look, you may ask? Well, it looks a little bit like this, and no, there hasn't been a filter applied to this footage. This is just what it looks like straight out of the camera, and it makes me look like a bit of a melted candle, more than usual. And as I'm sure you've already noticed, there is a weird buzzing, like clicking interference type of noise that's generated by the built-in mic, which I'm assuming is either down to a loose wire inside the camera or the fact that I bought this for £17 and you kind of get what you pay for. Now let's have a look at what the quality's like with the rear camera. Wow, that dynamic range doesn't exist, does it? Whee! Now, as far as I can tell, the rear camera produces about the same level of image quality as the front one, though I did notice that when recording in low light situations, the shutter speed will drop dramatically in order to compensate, creating this super blurry result. But weirdly, this wasn't an issue that I could replicate with the front camera, so this appears to be the slightly better option of the two. Unfortunately, things aren't that much better in photography mode either. Again, the shortcut buttons on the back are slightly random. The left sunshine icon button does actually have a function this time, allowing you to toggle between a 5 or 3 second timer. The OK button in the center once again enables or disables the flash, but this time it doesn't stay on permanently and only fires when you take the photo. And actually, it does a fairly good job of not overexposing the photo, so it does does kind of work in this mode. The right button on the D-pad will switch to the rear camera, just like we saw in the video mode, and this time the up and down buttons do absolutely nothing at all. I mean, that is unless you switch over to the fun camera mode, as I like to call it, where up and down now allow you to toggle between those lovely photo filters and overlays, most of which are completely pointless. I mean, there would be if, you know, this thing was actually able to capture nice looking images, because sadly everything this churns out looks like total mush, which is a real shame because its small pocketable size and cool looks gave me a bit of hope that this could be an interesting little point and shoot candid compact. Now, as most photographers know, more megapixels does not always mean better image quality, and this is a prime example of that. But my suspicion is that the sensor inside this doesn't actually have 48 megapixels at all. In reality, what I think is going on here is this just has a very cheap, significantly lower megapixel sensor, and then the camera is scaling up the photos afterwards to around 48 megapixels so that it can hoodwink unsuspecting buyers into thinking they're getting a decent camera, which they're not. Hilariously though, while snooping around the EXIF data of the images that I took, I noticed that the photos aren't actually 48 megapixels at all. They're technically 44.2 megapixels. I mean, sure, close enough, but I just don't understand why they'd bother lying about this twice. But then again, this has obviously been made by a company who are more than happy about selling copyrighted material, so I guess lying about the megapixel count is neither here nor there. But what I want to know is how low does their integrity go? Because does this even have a CCD sensor, or is that all smoke and mirrors too? Well, in order to find out, we need to perform a little bit of surgery. So with a rusty screwdriver, I carefully pried the camera apart, and believe it or not, inside it was absolutely packed with what appears to be modeling clay. Now, I can only assume that this has been added to give the camera some weight and therefore complete the illusion that it's a high quality product. Who knows? But anyway, after eating the modeling clay, I then took a look at the battery, which is a pretty standard rechargeable cell, the kind that you find in most electronic toys these days. You can also see the tiny LED light used for the flash, and behind that the smaller camera module for the rear camera. But I'm getting distracted because we're here for the big boy. Unfortunately though, even after unscrewing the camera module from its plastic mount, I really couldn't see any branding or serial codes on it anywhere. The only thing I could find was this code on the ribbon cable. So I headed back to my computer, and after searching online for literally minutes, I came away with nothing. I mean, there are plenty of very similar looking camera modules for sale online, but I couldn't find an exact match to the one that's used in this camera. So for now, this case will have to remain unsolved. So despite what it might look like, unfortunately it seems that this is nothing more than a cheap kids camera that has been reshelled into this admittedly pretty attractive looking retro casing as a means of cashing in on the CCD Digicam hype. So if you really want the retro digital photography experience, it seems like you've got two choices. You can either keep scouring the auction sites or dig a bit deeper into your dad's sock drawer in search of his old Canon PowerShot. Just maybe don't dig a little bit too deep. You never know what you're going to find in there.